Well, good evening. I'm Simon Lutzy. I'm joined by John Emmett.
Welcome. So, first things first, it's a dual show. We have it on Facebook Live for those people who are watching at the moment at 7 o'clock, and it's also premiered at 9 o'clock on YouTube. So, for those people who are watching it on YouTube at the moment, please remember to subscribe, and that way you'll get a notification for the next show. Just click the subscribe there in the bottom right hand corner, and we should all be there for the premiere. So Nick will be able to answer some questions, and you'll be able to see it for future reference.
Right, okay. So the Restart Sailing group has been busy again. We can always tell something's happened. A few thousand posts seem to go every time some announcement has. But where are we? I think we said 3 stages, but did that mean 3 lockdowns, John?
Well, I was looking at a lot of the graphs and the various tables, and we can see that it's just a worldwide trend. So I'm not at all surprised we had a third lockdown. And if you'd asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said that it was going to be the 28th of December, hence the suggested timing of that show. So, but it's good that action has been taken now because it saves lives.
Yeah, but I think our good old timeline, which is probably almost coming up to a year old, isn't it? It's still doing good
But that
duty.
that was one of the questions, Simon,
Yeah.
on the group. How do we see us getting back to sailing? And my reply, to paraphrase, was, well, I think the timeline that we have for restart sailing's pretty accurate, really.
Well,
Get
that's
ready,
right. We will
casual
get
sail.
ready. Yeah, casual sailing sort of basis, which will then lead into more organised racing as we sort of come out of it. I think the message at the moment we've gone to is really stay at home, but hopefully a few weeks of that will give some easing.
Just to say, because people have a lot of questions, we are doing our best to monitor both the Facebook and the YouTube. If people have questions, got a very special guest on later. So yeah, always
Yeah.
keen to hear from people. One of the big questions from last week's show was, is the Olympics going to happen? And also, why didn't it happen in 2020? And I think this little graph sadly shows the three waves quite clearly. As expected, Japan had that second wave, which started in June, and it was the right decision not to have the Olympics. You see the waves are slightly different sizes, partly due to the amount of testing, but it's very clear why the situation is what it is.
Yeah, but I think the Japanese are really keen to make something happen, aren't they? Even
Yeah, I think we should just be prepared for different Olympics, maybe bordering on spectator free. But for sailing, maybe that won't be such a noticeable thing. The big thing for sailors is probably arriving at the venue quite late. If you
yeah.
think about some venues, people are used to sailing there almost continually for 4 years or more before.
Well, that's right. So presumably no one's allowed there, are they, at the moment?
Well, at the moment it's okay because the weather conditions in Japan are very different to the Olympics, so people wouldn't be that keen to train. People will be in warm weather venues like the Canary Islands in Europe or in Australasia. But certainly when it comes to May, people will be very keen to get out there. And as it stands, and quite rightly so, you can't get into Japan at all at the moment.
Yeah. But I think other sports have shown, football, tennis, that these things can happen, and there's been some big competitions. Cricket have done very well, I think, haven't
Well, I think going back to Olympics, for the entire Olympic movement, if something can happen, they absolutely will make it happen
they? Yeah,
because it has a knock on effect for 24 and 28 and the whole Olympic movement.
yeah. Okay, so this is where we are at the moment. I think
Mhm.
the message is clear, isn't it? We need to really just,
Yeah, well, they've had practice, haven't they, setting up lockdowns.
yeah. Um, and I think, well, we're seeing familiar charts coming out. I think we've seen this graphic before, haven't we?
I just hope for people's mental health, it's easier this time round because we know what to expect because we've been through it before. It's like the first time you fall off a bike and scrape your knee, it really hurts. But if you unfortunately do it again and you know what to expect, maybe it's not quite so traumatic.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, we've been through it before. And one of the things with Restart Sailing is we've tried to prepare people for what we think may happen.
yeah.
So
And
for
I
more.
think there's an encouraging discussion about the importance of sport and grassroots sport. Elite sport is carrying on, isn't it? But obviously grassroots.
But sailing has a very good platform, is that we are very much an outdoor sport. Having said that, the number of people sailing in January is probably smaller than July, so hopefully less people are feeling less sad, missing their sailing. But I know it's hard on a lot of people. But I think the sooner they lock down, the sooner we go back to what we all want to be doing.
Yes, and I think hopefully we may see some easing, even though we're still under lockdown. You know, and things like under 18s coming back. I think disabled sport is allowed, isn't it?
Yeah, I think just a step-by-step approach makes a lot of sense, just to gradually ease when it's appropriate and make decisions they have on the data. And I think the vaccine coming out is fantastic news, and that's a question of time. But whether we end up having a yearly vaccine like they do now for the flu shot, or what happens precisely, I don't know. One of the interesting things in China with the domestic cases, they've had people who caused domestic cases after the 14 days. So in Hong Kong, for example, it's now 21 days quarantine. So there's a lot of small changes, but hopefully after January we'll be heading in the right direction.
Right, okay. Well, before we welcome our guest Nick, I think we've got something different to have a look at. So let's just play a little movie.
Good morning. This is Everest Base Camp. This is my tent here. It's an absolute shambles. We're going to be spending up to 45 days living here, recovering between our rotations. This is the man in charge. He's climbed Everest goodness knows how many times, and he's making the decisions up on the mountain. And that's our route from base camp up to the higher parts of the mountains, and arguably one of, if not the most dangerous part of climbing Everest. Every time we go through that is a bit like Russian roulette. Just arrived at one of the tricky sections on the Khumbu Icefall. The ice doctors have put in a line. We'll clip into that. So if we fall, then we'll only fall so far. This will give you a bit of a feel for just how sketchy what we're doing here on Everest is. This is not health and safety, this is horrendous. And I'm next. Oh God. We're now at Camp 2, Everest, in a humongous storm. It's gone on all night. Crikey, I really don't know what to say. I was just not expecting this at all. You can see our tents, most of them are now flattened, and it's just going to be a case of grab the kit we can carry, and we've got a 8-hour descent over the most technical part of Mount Everest, so it's not good, not a good situation. We're well over 7,000 meters now, and I can feel it. Just today, it's quite relentless up the Lhotse face, and you'll be able to see where we've come from, and that's where we'll be going tomorrow morning, resting for a few hours, and after that we're going to be heading up there, and that is Mount Everest.
Right, so welcome, Nick. I think
Absolutely amazing, Nick. The thing for me, and we'll talk about COVID in a minute because that's obviously very relevant to why we're in this situation of restarting sailing. But the thing for me, people think that it's the old people or the weaker people of society who are getting into difficulties with this, and it's hard to think of something more difficult on the lungs than what you've just achieved. So can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, excellent video, but yeah, in your own words, here and now, looking back.
Yeah, it'd be an absolute pleasure, and good evening to everyone as well. So the video you saw was my 2019 expedition to Mount Everest, which was successful. It had its challenges, but the challenges on Everest were nothing compared to the challenges I've had during 2020 and continues into 2021, and that is with COVID. And to give a little bit of background, I started last year really excited. I just signed up to a Guinness World Record attempt to be the first person to complete the 7 summits, which I'd achieved by climbing Everest. I previously climbed the other 6 highest mountains on the other continents, and ahead of me lay a crossing of Antarctica to the South Pole, full distance solo. Same with the North Pole, and then rowing the Atlantic. And it was a really exciting start to the year. But whilst in America on a training camp, I fell sick, and initially I didn't know what it was. I didn't think it was COVID. COVID noise was starting around that time. But as time went on, I just deteriorated. And I remember about 2 weeks after what I believe contracting it, trying to go for a walk, literally a 10-minute walk. And prior to that, I was running daily marathons. And I literally couldn't get home. I walked for 10 minutes. I needed to sit on the pavement. And in the end, I called an ambulance. Literally, I could not get home. I was that unwell. And I got a little bit better after that.
Just take me back. When did this first start, so everybody at home gets a really clear idea of the timeline and just how long this has been going on?
Yeah, so this happened in March. I contracted it in March, and interestingly, after feeling really unwell for a couple of weeks in the ambulance instance, I started to get a little bit better. And during April, May, I was doing okay, and I tried to get back to training, get back to work. And I think that was a big mistake. And I think that would be something I'd love to share with anybody if you do succumb to COVID, is don't rush to get back on your feet. And I say that not just from personal experience, but there's a lot of folk that have experienced exactly the same as me. And we call ourselves the long hauler community. People that fell sick with COVID and have struggled for not weeks, but months. And we're not far away from struggling for a year. It's quite extraordinary.
I mean,
and in the UK,
that will make a lot of sense about coming back too early, because we know that the elite athletes have a much higher percentage of ending up with long COVID.
Absolutely the case. And I was going to say within this community, and there's a Facebook group with 33,000 members,
Wow.
Most of whom from the UK. And within that group, there are an amazing amount of high performance athletes, including Olympians, professional triathletes. So yeah, just to go into COVID thinking I'm fit, I'm healthy, I've got no pre-existing conditions means I'm going to be immune from it, I might just feel a bit unwell for a week or two, is completely false. Completely false. And as John says, in fact, if you are in that camp of being very fit, you might actually be more susceptible to long COVID. And studies that have taken place within the long COVID community have shown that the average age is 46. So it's not a case of people that succumb to this are in their 70s, 80s, 90s. It's 46 is the average age. And in terms of, what are your chances of getting this? this is something that's really surprised me. The studies show about a 10% probability that if you contract COVID, you will succumb to the long COVID version, which means if your journey is anything like mine and thousands of others, you're in for a really rough ride.
And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you, Nick?
I'm 47 now,
Yeah.
47.
So you're actually fairly typical of the group average. I mean, the statistic I heard from people on funding, for elite people on funding, is around 30%. So if you look at something like Olympics, where it's quite a short athletic life, it could be career ending.
Without any shadow of a doubt. I mean, I'm now asking myself the question, am I going to recover from this? I've cancelled a bunch of stuff. I'm scheduled to be rowing the Atlantic in less than a year's time. And if my trajectory of progress is anything to go by, I'm not going to be doing that. I just need to be realistic about it. I've never experienced anything like this. I mean, I worked it out today. I've been unwell for 304 days, So imagine having a rough hangover, or imagine having flu and that lasting for 300 plus days. That's really, without overemphasizing or overdwelling on it, that's been the journey that I've had with COVID. So my message is, you don't want this. You really don't want this.
We chatted earlier on today, and how are you about how you were feeling? I mean, how are you feeling today? Live show?
Yeah, live show. I'm feeling awful. Genuinely appalling today.
So thank you. First of all, thank you very much for coming on, because personally I know a few people who suffer from long COVID, and because of the fatigue, quite a few were just reluctant because they thought, it's difficult and they just needed to be resting. So thank you so much for, giving us your time.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And the fatigue, I mean, in terms of the symptoms with long COVID, there are numerous symptoms, but actually a common theme or symptom across all is this fatigue. And it's quite hard to actually articulate what I mean by fatigue, because we all get a bit tired. We might wake up, I didn't sleep so well last night. This is a different ball game. And in conjunction with the fatigue, you have this brain fog, which means it's very difficult to think straight. Your cognitive capability is maybe, today I'm probably 30% of my normal cognitive capability. And doing anything that requires effort, whether it's physical or mental, is unbelievably exhausting. So, for example, after this, I'll go to bed. That will be me done then for the rest of the day. So, the fatigue is quite extraordinary.
I thank you for saying that, because I think it's just to raise awareness, and without going, into politics, which is an absolute minefield at the moment. But for anybody who has had COVID, that difficulty in thinking and making good decisions must be, just as bad in some respects as the mental side of things. The physical side of things. If you're in an important position, you've got to make decisions, and you've got a brain fog.
Yeah, and if you look across the community, I mean, and I'd say, finger in the wind guess, 50% of the COVID long haulers are still not back at work. So i.e. they've been out off work for up to 9-10 months. And literally just kind of doing everything they can to hang in there, to try and get themselves well. And there's a huge amount of uncertainty as well, because none of us know where this is going to end, whether we're going to fully recover, whether we're going to get back to 80-90% of where we were, or whether we're going to have chronic illness for the rest of our life. And that chronic illness could fall under the CFSME category, autoimmune disease, lupus. And at the moment, nobody really knows exactly what it is. There's lots of theories that are being thrown around. What I'm trying to do on a personal level is explore all of them and try and treat myself as though I've got them. So treat myself as though I've got chronic fatigue syndrome, treat myself as though I've got an autoimmune disease. But there's also very little information that's available to us. So you've got this whole community of people that are desperately unwell, that are scrambling around, just trying to reach out for help. And really, I would say the help that has not come from the medical profession per se. It's come from a collective experiment of trial and error and people just sharing their personal experience.
And that's because it's a novel virus, isn't it? Until 2019 or for most people, I guess 2020, no one knew knew anything about it. And even with the latest developments, you know, it's all just a question of research and catching up, and something that's evolving.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case.
And it sounds like there is a strong sort of support group, and I guess thank heaven for social media, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and for me that was a real godsend, because for the first, I didn't come across that group. I didn't know for probably coming up to 3 months that there were other people suffering as well. And I felt really isolated. I sort of, there was this expectation that I would be well fit back training, and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And actually, it was a huge relief when I finally went online. I joined this group to see that there were thousands of other people in exactly the same boat. And yeah, that's been a great source of support throughout this ordeal.
I mean, that's great. I mean, that's a modern time. And if you think 20 years ago, we didn't have the social media. And I think the mental side of it, with any disease, it's really difficult, because it's like mourning, as in it's like a death, because you've lost your health, and it's natural to feel that that loss, and just to have other people around you. I'm really glad you said that, and obviously you would encourage anybody else who's currently suffering to reach out to other sufferers.
Yeah, absolutely, I would. Whether and feel free to come through to me directly if you want some tips and advice. But I would recommend just joining the Facebook COVID long haul support group, because it's brilliant. There's a wealth of knowledge and information in there. But you're absolutely right, because this is a head game. Going through this, managing long COVID is a real head game. And the other challenge you have is that it's not a linear recovery. So normally you break an ankle, I don't know, you're going to be in for a rough ride for maybe 8 weeks, 10 weeks, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, and generally your progress will occur on a linear fashion. Long COVID is not at all like that. You might have a period where you seem to be recovering, and then something will happen. It might be you overdo it. It might be you go for a half-hour walk or something like that, and that you've blown it, and you're right back down to square one. So it's real snakes and ladders, and managing that psychologically is so difficult. Yeah, it's such a challenging thing. So yeah, mentally it's a bigger challenge than physically, and certainly the toughest thing that I've ever gone through.
I mean, we really appreciate you saying that, because I think for some people, they may be the other end, where they're really struggling just to stay at home, do all the things they're being asked to do, wear a mask, wash your hands. I thought I was going to end up looking like the Terminator with all the skin coming off my hands from washing. But it's absolutely worth it to stay safe at what I guess certainly in the UK is an absolutely crucial time in terms of the infection management.
Yeah, and I get it as well. If you look at it as somebody who's healthy, fit, you've been restricted through the various lockdowns and what have you for this period of time, it's very easy to become frustrated, and it's also very easy to become a little bit blasé about the whole thing.
We talk about the pandemic fatigue. People don't want to be told anymore.
And I get that, and even having gone through what I've gone through, I get that myself. There's things like, oh really, this is still going on, oh really, I can't go out. I experienced that, but gosh, if I could go back in time and do things differently, what I'd give to be able to go back in time and do that, and if you haven't succumbed to COVID yet, you have got that chance, that opportunity right now, to absolutely minimize your risk of contracting
that once in a lifetime opportunity.
But yeah, as I say, and I'll repeat it, you do not want this. Yeah, you don't.
And even probably from what you're telling me, the 6 weeks after you contracted it, maybe what you did during that period of time.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that fair to say?
If I could go back in time again, I would do literally nothing. And it's interesting that actually I'm not sure which sports body, but they've actually advocated now for sports people, if you do contract COVID, do nothing, do not exercise until quite a period has passed since your last symptoms And I really would follow that. It's not like a cold or a flu where, you know, you feel a bit rubbish. You say, I'll just go for a run and I'll shake it off, or I'll go out sailing for a day and I'll feel better at the end of it. It doesn't work like that. Yes, you've really got to back down and take it easy. And that's something else. That's another regret of mine. Typical me, type A personality. As soon as I could, I was trying to get back training.
That's the type of person who succeed at the highest level, isn't it? Whatever your sport or occupation, it's the people who work really hard, and you know, we get that. That's why we're here with the Restart Sailing Show, to give people the information, and obviously much better coming firsthand from somebody like you.
No, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity just to get the message out there as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Nick.
So in terms of the coaching, I'm going to try and look at what people can do in a safe way.
Yes. Okay. So, well, a bit of news, and some of this actually, I think, sort of Nick has touched upon in terms of why groups like Restart Sailing and obviously the long COVID groups were so important. It's all about the community, isn't it? And working together. And I think mental well-being is going to be a big sort of topic, I think, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's equally true for the people who have been lucky enough not to get COVID, but are maybe not able to do their job and all the things they're used to. I think mental health is something which affects everybody, and maybe people who don't realise it at the time.
Yeah. And I think that's been some of the biggest feedback of what we've been doing Restart Sailing. It's been a chance to sort of talk to people and sort of gather, even though we might be go sailing. And I think, and again, thank heavens for the technology. So it's pleased to be able to sort of announce that we've now affiliated ourselves to the REA, so now official, and got that sort of a tick in the box, and that will allow us really to sort of work with clubs, classes and events in a more sort of a formalised process. So a big milestone, and thanks for the REA for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so one of the big things that should have been going on is the Selden Sailjuice Winter Series, which unfortunately we're under AP, which quite sort of justifiable.
Sad, but sensible. That's the
So
that's where it is.
Really, current events obviously postponed. We're obviously trying to move events around, but what Andy Rice and I have been doing is filling the gaps. So when we have an event, so last week was meant to be the Grafham Grand Prix. I think it has been the 50th or 60th or something like that. Some big sort of milestone that obviously didn't happen. But we were able to do a big session with Andrew Craig on handicapping. And I think unsticking the laser, I'm not quite sure if that's aimed at you, John, but...
I'm not going to say it's not appreciated. That's not bad.
yeah. Making the laser go faster, but really looking at the way handicaps work and trying to mix them up. And I think it's a dynamic world, isn't it? And we need to keep revisiting these things. I think it's good to have people like Andrew helping us. And then, some really rescheduling of events. So I think, certainly January is off. Hopefully we might see something at the back end of February, but these are obviously all provisional and but it's good to see the clubs are being flexible. I mean, interesting, I don't know if you picked up already, John, that even for national championships in the summer, I'm seeing alternative events coming up, alternative dates coming up. Right. So classes are putting forward normal dates and putting secondary dates as well. So I think
I think that's a very sensible approach. I always say about trying to hope for the best but plan for the worst.
Yeah. So I think this year is going to be again another a flexible and an adaptable thing. But again, I think as you said, we've really learned a lot about how to deal with it, and sailing's become quite a COVID secure sort of sport.
And when you get those habits, if it's the distancing or whatever, after a while habits are easy. That's what habits are.
Yeah. So I think as a sport, we're sort of probably in a good sort of shape in terms of how to sort of deal with it. But I think I expect an adaptable schedule. I think will probably be the best way of describing it. Right. Okay. Moving on, John.
Yeah, it's a strange one because January, that's normally new season, new resolutions after Christmas and all the rest of it, and it's a great reset. I think. I mean, it does feel a little bit like season 2 of the COVID COVID Netflix show or whatever. I mean, I'm probably not going to be thanked for saying this, but there was a Matt Damon film, I think it's called Contagion or something like that.
Oh, yes.
And Billy walked in and thought it was a documentary, and I'm not I'm not joking.
It's quite scarily accurate, I think, isn't it?
Well, I think people have known. If you look, Obama and Bill Gates and all these people, they talked about it possibly happening, and you can see scientific papers from a long time ago saying that there was always this possibility. So yeah, this new season, we just have to make the best of it. I think one of the easiest goals is things like weight and fitness that you can do in the comfort of your own living room. I think that's really important, and you can make the best of your time because people have a lot of time. So you can have a clear fitness goal, clear weight goal. Then, when we get back to sailing, initially it's going to be no competition, and that really is the opportunity for skill development.
Yeah. Okay. So, next slide.
So a lot of people are getting very frustrated, and there's a lot of information out there which isn't quite correct. So if I was going to go to a venue to do a sailing championship, so I'd always look at having a good source of information, whether I'm thinking about tide tables or the meteorology. One of the things for important championships, you want to know what the weather's going to be like when you get there. And I think the key thing is to listen to the experts in the field. And that's just as true with COVID as anything else. I mean, if somebody had never seen a laser race before and they'd never even sailed, they might think going out in 5 or 6 knots was very dangerous, because every time these boats turn, they heel all the way over and the sailor nearly falls out and all the rest of it. Whereas, experienced laser sailor knows that actually sailing at 5 or 6 knots is incredibly safe. So if you look at the people who are working on the vaccines and all the rest of it, they're people who've done years and years and years and years of this. And there's many, many people working on it. So such a frustrating time. But thanks, Nick, very much for coming on and just showing why we need to listen to the experts. And as I said, I see light at the end of the tunnel, and it's really hard to know where that end is going to be. But I've said it before, I would expect things to be looking quite a lot different in May, and it's just a case of hang on and be patient, and then hopefully in 10 years' time we'll all be looking back and thinking this was just a rather frustrating blip in the road. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. But January is a particularly bad time for respiratory disease, and it's obviously a really, really bad time for COVID because of this.
Right, okay, so nearly coming to the end, so 2 weeks' time, isn't it?
Yeah, so all things being equal, we should be back on our fortnightly schedule. I guess a lot of people will be at home, so it might be easier to see. The intention is always to have the 7 o'clock Facebook Live and then the 9 o'clock YouTube premiere. Hopefully people can ask questions on both. I know Nick is feeling particularly bad today, so perhaps he won't be available. But yeah, come and look at those, ask questions, and if you don't manage to get it, both of these are recorded and there for posterity. Yeah. So hopefully another really good show coming up.
And for show 20, we're pleased to be joined by Ian Winson. People might be familiar with the name. He's been active on the Restart Sailing group. But Ian is head of the Charter Association and been doing a lot of good work in terms of supporting the trade. There's obviously a lot of small businesses there, often people with one boat chartering it out. Where the support has been mixed, but I know Ian's done a lot of good work in terms of helping them get grants and things like that. So again, it'd be good to see another perspective of how really people are adapting and coping, and again, how we're supporting ourselves. So please be joined by Ian.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Right. Thank you very much.